Well, welcome everyone. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest. This is Thera Strom. I've known her for several years, actually. She's become a friend. She's definitely a colleague, and she's just doing amazing work. So Thera is an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. She's an advanced grief recovery specialist. She's a published author. She's a speaker, podcaster. She does training videos. She's a military spouse, so she's been in many places around the world. She's actually in other parts of the world right now, so I'm so grateful for technology. But I just want to welcome you. So thank you for being with us, Thera. I really appreciate it.
Sandi. Yeah, the sun might start setting on us, but it's not going to keep us down. So thank you for making the time and invite me to be here with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, for starters, can you just share a little bit more about you, about where you're living today, about how are things going today? Tell us a little bit about your family.
You know, it's funny when you mentioned telling a little bit about myself, I had this immediate surge of panic. And I think identity, and I'll explain why, just really authentically and honestly, because I love talking to you. So feels so natural and organic, but describing ourselves and our identity is a big deal. Like, for marketing, there's the elevator pitch, and when you're dating, you kind of have your own identity, whether it's online or in person, and then professionally, how we share who we are. So as I introduce myself, I think, what version do I give, and what does that even look like, and where am I today compared to how I identified before? And as an American, I usually go with what I do, right? I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so my identity is tied to this title. I'm an advanced grief recovery specialist, so there's identity tied to that, or military spouse, or mom. And those are things that are definitely a part of who I am. But to be honest, I kind of hesitate when I am asked how to describe myself, because I want to say I'm kind and compassionate and empathetic, and if I led with that would just sound so I don't know, cheesy. I'm not sure how that would come across, but that's how I would describe
you actually are those things. You are kind and empathetic. You know what? I love what you just said though about as an American. So is
Yeah,
it different? Because you're in, where are you right now? You're in Portugal right now.
I'm in Portugal. So we are my husband's an active duty Marine, and we're kind of creeping up on the very end of his career before retirement. But so he was a pilot, still is, I suppose, but now that it's over 20 years, he's more into other flying desks, as they say. So we've been in Rome, Italy for about 10 months. He went to a school there, and now we're in Portugal for a couple of years, and he's in a Portuguese military installation, but working as an active duty Marine. And so we have had the opportunity to live in Europe as a military family. So yes, we are in Portugal. It is after 6 p.m. here. And like I said, the sun will set, but it's just, I love it here so much, and grateful to be anywhere, but happy to be here in Europe.
Do you find that in Europe that people then don't lead as much with what they do? Like if they're going to describe themselves, do they lead less with what they do?
That's a
Like, is
really
that
good.
an American thing?
Yes, I think that's pretty American. There's a lot of differences in, I think, in how we communicate and personality, and even our personal space. And I've noticed there's a lot more emphasis maybe on like family. So you would identify as your role in the family, like mother, grandmother. I'm sure there's some that's lost on me in translation, because I'm still learning the Portuguese language. But if I meet with an Uber driver, for instance, that's where I try to practice my awful Portuguese. But when I practice there, I notice the questions are more like, how many children do you have? Where do you live? Do you like Portugal? There's very seldom has anyone ever asked if what I do or who I am. Like, so I don't have to answer that way. Now, part of me wonders if that's part of the military culture too, because there's also an assumption as a military spouse that I don't work. So there's also just a general expectation or stereotype that military spouses often aren't not employed, which statistically could be true because we move a lot and it's hard to, with a license and so forth, it's hard to keep an active career when you move frequently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you've been able to do that. You've kept your career active, maybe not as much as when you were in the States, but still seeing
Exactly. Yeah.
clients. Yeah.
It's been a hustle, though. I tell you. And again, kind of going back to identity, I'm a twin, and so that's another piece of my identity. Is I'm a twin sister, and I wanting to be different and known and on my own rights and my own independence. I've really wanted to have that independence, and of course, I marry a United States Marine, so then that identity is kind of sucked into this military culture. But I did want to stay active in a career because that's where I thought identity came from, was from what you do. And so I received my license in clinical social work in Virginia, and then we got orders to California. So then I had to do the work and the tests and the licensure application, all that stuff to become licensed in California. So now I hold a license in those two states. And then we moved, so every time we move, it's like you're like, well, what if we go back to Virginia? I don't want to give up that license because we might go back there. What if we go to North Carolina? And so my need to be professionally identified, but then also just stimulated. I really love what I do. It's been important for me. I'm a better wife. I'm a better mom, person, human when I'm get to work a little bit. And calling it work is almost unfair because I just really enjoy the type of interactions I have with my clients.
It's amazing how fulfilling that is. It really is amazing how fulfilling it can be. And so let me ask you then, as far as getting into this space, licensed clinical social worker, grief work, I know for me, I got into this space because I have my own story and I had my own things to walk through. And I feel like in walking through those things, it gave me a passion for others. Is it similar? Do you feel like for you?
No, actually, I think my story is a little bit different than a lot of the people who focus on grief that I've met. I usually do have a really compelling, traumatic story, and I didn't think I did. If I'm being honest, my twin sister was injured in Baghdad. She was an active duty Air Force officer, and she was almost killed in 2004 in Baghdad she was 10 feet away from a suicide bomber. We were both 24. I quit my marketing job, which I had, and I moved to the Fisher House in San Antonio, Texas, and I was able to. I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Fisher House. It's like the Ronald McDonald House for active duty military. Again, we're 24 years old. I'm able to stay there near the hospital and visit her. And I remember having this moment that I realized I didn't want, I worked really, really hard in the marketing and branding industry. And I remember thinking, I work so hard. I want to work hard for like people. I had this moment where I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like here, my sister almost died. I'm looking at burn victims all in the hospital all day. And they just had this beautiful spirit and heart. And the nurses were surrounding them and like joking with them and encouraging them. And I was just like, I want a meaningful career. Like if I'm going to work hard, I want it to be for people. But I knew I couldn't do nursing because I will faint watching Grey's Anatomy. Like just a scene with blood, I'm out. So I'm like, okay, I can't. Nursing's not my thing. That's not going to work. So fast forward, I'm married to a Marine and a helicopter pilot, and so I'm like, oh gosh, like with safety and all the things that come along with that type of career. And I was able to. He transferred his post 9/11 GI Bill, half of it to me, and I was able to get my master's in social work. So my background's actually like marketing, communications, and here I am later in life in my mid 30s becoming a social worker. And I kind of was thinking women empowerment. I didn't really know. So I worked at a homeless shelter. I worked at Child Protective Services. And then we got orders in California. So we moved to California. I started working for the Navy. United States, the Navy has a counseling service called Fleet and Family Center. And I started doing therapy there. It's called short-term solution focused type counseling. And I was able to use my Virginia license there because that's a federal position. And I noticed all these clients had some type of loss. They had some type of loss. And it wasn't like, I wouldn't have used the word grief at that time because, I had like 12 minutes of grief training about the 5 stages of grief in my master's program. So like I knew about the 5 stages. I thought that's what we talked about. That's all I was taught in my master's program. But I felt ill equipped. I just did not feel like I could help these clients coming through. I was connecting with them. I liked the work, but when you feel inadequate, which is what I felt, I just started doing research on what other programs exist on grief training. So here I am trying to get my license in California. I'm working for the Navy. I'm doing this Google research and I find the Grief Recovery Institute. I said, oh, I'll just do that training. That's lovely. It's a 4-day training. So I go to sign up and I saw the cost. And I was like, oh, hell no. I'm not spending more money and more time. I'm still paying off loans. I'm not doing this. So I dismissed it. And I went back to work and I was like, I'll figure it out. I have my master's degree. I'll figure it out. I have my license now. I'll figure it out. Then my dear friend's little girl, Lily, 7 years old, died from a brain tumor, a rare brain tumor. And I saw online the things people were saying on social media. I talk about feeling ill-equipped before with my clients. Here I had a friend whose daughter died, and I didn't know what to say. I felt so embarrassed. I felt so inadequate because here I was with my magical master's degree, and I'm in the work. I'm providing therapy. Grief is like a solution focused. That's not a diagnosable thing, right? So I'm doing that type of work, and I was like, if I don't know how to help, what are other people doing? Like I'm like at least more. I have some education under my belt. So then I went back to my trusty website and I did the training, 4 beautiful days of my life. But let me tell you, Sandi, let me show you that. I don't know if I'll be on video, but I was in the training like this. I had my arms crossed because everyone in there had their story. They had all this, traumatic loss, their own death that they faced, the death of like really cherished loved ones. And I sat in this like horseshoe shaped room, right? All these chairs. Bobby Rill was a coach. And I sat like this and I was like, I'm here to help others. I'm not here to like talk about my losses. I don't have any losses. Right. And she's like, well, so you go through the training, you do the work. And then like day 3, Bobby is telling a story about how her father came to the restaurant where she was a waitress and like bought all the tables and all the chairs. And so all his friends could sit in her section. And she just said it was a beautiful memory and she felt very supported. And she looks over at me and she's like, Thera, can I give you a hug? And everyone looked over at me and here I was sobbing, just sobbing at a beautiful, tender memory where her father showed support. Just a cute little story, yet that brought me to tears. And when I was looking at just reviewing my losses, I had a lot of intangible losses, loss of support, loss of trust, loss of safety, loss of identity, questioning my, belief system. And so I learned a new language that grief is absolutely applicable to intangible losses. And I never would have used the word grief to describe that. But once I received this language, I realized I'm in the right place. This is the lens in which I now see the world. And so that's kind of my really long-winded story of what brought me to this method. And it's been years, Sandi. We started working together you know, I'm kind of one of those people that I ride a wave and then I get tired of it. Like my resume looks like I get around, it's like all these jobs, and like I'm one of those people that just kind of goes and goes. But this is stuck. This is my lens. And I've said before, like that commercial that says everywhere I think I see becomes a Tootsie Roll to me, that commercial. That's grief. Grief is my Tootsie Pop. That's how I see the world. So anyway, that's
What?
my
No, that
very long.
was that was that was so good. I wanted to ask you. So in that moment when you're in the training and you're sobbing, was it when you heard Bobby share the story about her father buying all the tables in her section that you realized that you didn't have that from your father? Was that the moment that you went, "Oh, I missed out on that kind of support."
Right, exactly. And my father's still alive, right? And I would have, I would have said, "Oh, I'm not grieving my father. He's still alive." But when I think about it, I lost my father. I lost him when he married my stepmother.
Wow.
I didn't lose him at the divorce. I was 5 or 6. Me and my twin sister were 5 or 6. We didn't lose our dad at the divorce. We lost them when we lost him when he got married. Like that's, I don't know if I've told you this, Sandy, but I remember when our parents sat us down and they said, "We're getting a divorce. We're getting a divorce." Even the language around loss is acquiring. We're getting it. So my 5-year-old little brain, I don't know if I've told you this, I
Mm.
thought we were getting a new car, because to me, a divorce sounds like a Cadillac. We're getting a divorce. So I remember thinking, and mom and dad were like crying, and I'm like, I remember thinking, like, I don't know why they're crying. We're getting a new car. Like I walked away and I went to the neighbor's house and I was like, this is the panhandle of Florida. And I was like, "Miss Brenda, we're getting a divorce." And she was like, run along. You get out of here. Like, don't spread that around. And I was like, she's just jealous. She must be jealous. We're getting a new divorce. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then dad moved out, and I don't remember that having a lot of impact. But then all of a sudden, there was a new family. And that new
Mm.
family had their pictures on the wall. You wouldn't know I existed. You walk into that house, there's no pictures of us. There's at Christmas time, the other kids get gifts and we don't. We go to McDonald's and they get Happy Meals and I get a burger. Like there were story after story where I didn't have a father that said, "You're my child. You're mine. I love you. You are equal." Instead, the message was, "You're not worthy of protection. You're not seen." Not maliciously. I think my dad was working on his own insecurities. Again, I'm not taking away little Tara's what she went through, and I'm not making excuses, but if I'm being honest, I do have compassion for my father and how he must have been struggling with his own security and confidence to not be able to step in and protect.
I appreciate you sharing that so much because, I know for both of us in the space of grief and loss, it's often so misunderstood, and sometimes people look at my story where I have the really severe abuses and then they can miss their own story where sometimes it's, wow, these things happened. Sometimes it's, wow, these things didn't happen and I really needed them. I needed support. I needed connection. I needed to be known. I needed to be seen. And that's just as impactful. But a lot of
Yeah,
times, like you said, it's less tangible. It's less, oh, it was this one event. I also really appreciated what you said about the divorce and about how you're a child thinking you're getting a car, not realizing that it meant that your parents were not going to be together anymore. So
yeah,
they use this adult language. And like you said, we're getting. So you're thinking, oh, we're going to get something.
yeah. And what a shift too. I think back and I'm like, I didn't have the foundation of an absent father my whole life. So there was a very present father. Like if you look at like photo albums, they all stopped after the divorce. There was like pictures of the kids and like, and then that went away, you know? And so it's like, I had this foundation of like, we were getting a car, like living this type of not delusion, but just like that we acquire things and life is okay. And then so these, I'm gonna call them like micro events, even though they weren't micro, they were very big and they really stand out. But these events where it was like such a dagger to this little heart of like, why am I getting a different meal than my siblings? Like they get to drink Coke and I get water, or they get tennis rackets and I get a bag of rubber bands for Christmas. Like these real events took place, and it hurt because I wasn't used to that. And I'm not saying it would have been better if I was used to it, but I didn't have like a language around that even until I'm an adult. You do all this work in the master's program, and I could say like, oh yeah, there were some difficulties in my childhood, but I wouldn't have identified it as these losses that were really chronic trauma, if we're being honest. I mean, again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but like, I used to think trauma was like my twin sister was almost killed by a suicide bomber. That's traumatic. Like, she thought she was going to die. Okay. She lost her skin. I mean, she had to get skin grafts all over her body. So to me, like, she gets the title of trauma. No one else does. And I was even kind of judgmental around other people too, right? Which is another thing about therapists, right? Like, what we do can be so subjective. We diagnose based on what? A subjective list of criteria? Like, even that's questionable about how we determine what diagnosis people get, because a lot of it's like our own understanding of, and again, our own lens. So anyway, yeah. So it's just getting to acknowledge that was absolutely emotional and also very like freeing too. But it's not a story I tell often as part of the introduction to identity, because I'm still doing the deep dive. Every day there's some new ways to look at this, chronological timeline of our life and
Yes.
what's really true and not true. Because I would have told you I was telling the truth 10 years ago, and I think I'm telling the truth today. But
Well, and I really kind of getting to identity too. So here you are, you've had one experience of your parents, you've had one experience of your dad. They go through a divorce, but then this other woman comes into your life and everything changes. And I really appreciated what you said about loss of identity, because I feel like that is a lot of times one of the major losses that gets really overlooked. Like, you and I have had a lot of dialogue recently about belief systems, not doctrinal belief systems, but like, what are my identity building blocks, right? So if I go through, hey, my parent is attached and now they're not, a child doesn't look at their parent and go, oh, look what my parent did. A child goes, what's wrong with me? Like,
yeah,
what's wrong with me, right? Like, a child starts to form these beliefs and make these agreements that say, I'm not enough, I'm
yeah,
rejected, I'm abandoned, and those become like identity building blocks. And so it is a loss of identity. And so a lot of times with grieving, it's like, yes, there's the emotionality of grieving, but also, man, what is it that I took on and believed about me that actually isn't true? Like, I'm like, my bus is running on a lie. And so I feel like that's you know what I mean? That's like a huge piece of healing, is reclaiming the essence of who I am.
mm-hmm. Yeah, these. I remember my stepmom. I remember I was like 5 or 6, and they were newly married, and I would go to crawl in my dad's lap. That's what little girls do. And she whispered in my ear, "You look like a whore when you crawl in your dad's lap." And I didn't know what that word meant. I'd never heard the word whore. Most 6-year-olds don't know that word.
No.
And I asked my twin sister, I was like, what's a whore? And she's 6, right? So she says, it's when a woman shakes her boobies at people. So, because that was her definition of what she thought that word meant. And I remember making a decision to put up a wall and to not touch or be touched.
Mm.
Some people go the other way, right? Like, because we are like, you make this like decision and this identity of like, oh, I won't be called that word. I don't want anyone to think I'm that word. So I no longer reach for affection from my father or anyone else. I remember making all A's and saying, I made all A's. And she's like, well, you go to a stupid school. My stepmother, you go to a stupid school. So I remember thinking, okay, I'm not smart. I'm not smart. So I have to really be likable and work really hard. And so it was like, again, I can tell you this now as an adult and doing some reflective work, but like at the time, I was very motivated by these beliefs, but I wouldn't even known to identify them as beliefs because it was just this is what any respectable woman is stoic and very or not stoic but like we have walls up, we don't shake our boobies at people or whatever, we think that's what bad women do, and then we have to work really hard and we have to be maybe more masculine, or we dismiss compliments, or if we do get good grades, it must be because there's a flaw in the system. So any win that I get actually isn't really deserved. And so we just dismiss. So I want to be seen and I want to do well, but I'm not going to actually receive it, which is why I'm in my late 30s before the concept of grace, even though I was raised, Catholic church and that type of thing. Like
Wow.
that was hard. It still is. That's a daily practice and confusion. A daily confusion is just grace because it's not deserved, it's not earned. But if you look back, it was like that was a lot of dismissing and no counter to that to say she's wrong.
Absolutely. And because even though it was your stepmother, it's still an authority figure in your life. It's somebody, like a lot of times when we're internalizing these things, it's like intensity attached, right? If somebody's in an authoritative position, they have more clout in my world than somebody who's not, or somebody who's more distant.
Oh, that became the identity of who I hustled. And I was like a moth to the flame for that narcissistic type person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you go to a narcissistic person with a win, you're hoping this is the day I get a compliment. This is the time that they're going to give me an attaboy, right? And so like Sandy, I probably had people in my life that gave me attaboys and encouragement and love. And I'm like, nah, yep, dismiss. I want it from this jackass. I want it from this person who doesn't know love.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we do that? What's the
Well,
answer?
because that's what gets ingrained, right? Like that's what gets internalized, and it's like we have to unlearn those things. Because like I love what you're saying about grace, because when I think about internalizing beliefs, or when we have these losses to grieve, a lot of it, when I talk about, it takes us away from the essence of who we were supposed to be, it also takes us away from the voice of who God says we are.
Oh
Like
yeah.
when we first got on the podcast and you said, I really want to introduce myself as like, I'm compassionate, I'm caring, I'm empathetic. And it's like, because you are, I mean, I've known you a long time now. You are. And the other thing that you are is you're very real. I mean, you're not a person of pretense at all, which is one of the many reasons I love talking to you so much, is because I never have ever felt like I'm not getting Thera. I always know that it's you. You're very real. You don't hide behind like, oh, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Like you don't hide behind that at all. You're a very real person. And
It's
those are
exhausting. It's exhausting now. I'm like, you know what? It's too much work. I have to just like those Venn diagrams are like the circles that like kind of go over. Like I want my identity, professional, personal, I want to be so closely aligned that there's not much. Like I don't want the lab overlap to be this tiny little thing. I want it to like it's just too much work to live two different identities. So
Well, exactly,
thank
but that is who you are. And so, when I hear your story and those parts of your story, it's like, man, what your stepmother spoke into you and the fact that your father didn't counter it, right? Like it wasn't countered by anybody either, leads you to believe, okay, so this must be true because this person is in authority. So this must be true. And even what you said about going to McDonald's and like, oh, those her kids are getting Happy Meals and I'm getting just a hamburger. It's like she didn't even have to say anything there. She didn't have to look at you and say, you mean less. But that experience, then you're internalizing, I mean less. So there's grief in that, as well as these internalized lies. And all of that really, I believe, takes us away from the Father's voice, like the true voice of grace and love and meaning, what he really says about who we are. Because now those things are loud, right? Those beliefs are loud.
And those core beliefs, they're so like lightning fast. And there's no thoughts to the core belief. I mean, it's just a core belief is just like, I'm less than. So if I'm less than, and that's a core belief,
Yes.
I could do all the marketing training in the world. I could learn about branding or whatever. But when I started my practice and I was doing pricing, I noticed if other therapists charge 150, I'll charge 60 an hour. Like, and if someone's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, oh, because I'm going to do like a coupon and I'm going to, like, I could justify it. But if I was like really getting to the core of my belief system and being really honest, it was because I was less than, and other people get the Happy Meals, and I get the burger and water. Like that's just a core belief. And so then to expose that
Yeah.
and to be sobbing at a story where a father just gets a couple tables for his friends in his daughter's section, like for that to bring tears, I was like, so to reflect on that and then to do this work, it's a daily practice to hear the truth. And it's been a journey. I'm in the middle of it. I'm still diving deep into it, and it's been really confusing and counter to these core beliefs that are it's like a neural pathway in your head and your heart. It's deep.
It's super deep. But you've also, in doing that, right, there's this good fruit that you can reap. Like going back to what you said about pricing, I love that you brought that up. Because even when I'm with people and I'm coaching people, um, you know, I will say to them, I can give you the ins and outs of, hey, do these things, right? Market this way, do this kind of video. Let's say they want to be a coach or they want to be a grief recovery specialist or they want to do whatever, you know, say these things, right? You can give somebody all of that knowledge, but the best work is done internally because I could do all of those things. But if I still believe I'm less than or not enough, then I'm going to create I'm less than or not enough, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm going to price myself less. I'm going to, not have confidence when I'm talking to somebody, even if I'm really skilled. And so I love that you're someone that walks with people, you help a lot of people. People love working with you because of who you are. And yet at the same time, you also do your own work. And so you're also like growing, changing as a person. And I think for anybody listening, you know, it's not something to be overwhelmed by. Like I always say when you're in a process, just be on your journey. We don't have to have it all
Yes,
figured out.
the word work. I've noticed I'm kind of getting
Mm,
a hesitation and a resistance to the word work, and that happened earlier today in our session and for our chat. It's coming up again, and I feel like that could be someone else's resistance by us just even using this word work. So I want to call it something else. I don't clarity, like just like a clarity journey where we get to like
wow.
be, and it's definitely about honesty. But honesty, like I said, honesty shifts as we get more feedback mirrored to us from a good, healthy person,
Yep.
right? If we don't have like a good, healthy person who could say like, okay, tell me more about that and like help us really like challenge those beliefs and that identity without shame, without judgment, without
Yeah.
overanalyzing, without diagnosing, if we'd have that mirror and a really beautiful, healthy human connection, which I'm finding is difficult as we get older. or live in Europe or whatever. But it's like I crave that, like that interaction, which is why, I just look forward to our monthly time together. Just like, okay, here's a healthy person who gets to like stand neutral, but also reflect back what you're hearing. And that's just, there's a lot of growth. And so I have made a personal commitment to grow always for the rest of my life. I don't know what that, hopefully mentally and spiritually and emotionally, not so much physically, but I hope to grow.
Well, and again, going back to what you said about work, it's true because if we're saying you need to do the work, right? A lot of times I find if I'm not on an internal clarity journey and I'm not on like, hey, I want to heal, I want to grow, I want to move forward. If I'm not doing that, I actually create a lot more work for myself
Well, it's
because
like the
it's a
word
lot harder.
divorce.
Yeah.
If the word, we need to know what words we're using. Like, words are so powerful and important. And so, yeah, it's almost like we need to grow. And growth takes an honest look and like, okay, how can I look at this situation that happened and grow from it? Doesn't mean that we condone the behavior of people who were very evil or hurt us, but it's like, okay, I can grow from this. It's really empowering. Like, I think a lot of my growth has come from like even kind of journeying back in a meditative state to little Tara. And I am her advocate. Like, I see her scared when she was being slapped. And I remember there's one scene I remember where I thought, I was like 8 or 9, and I remember thinking I was going to die. I thought my stepmother was going to come and kill me in the middle of the night. Again, that was a very exaggerated belief or thought because I was little, and I thought, that would happen. And I journey back to that scene, and I rub her back, and I'm like, girl, she's so insecure. She's just, like, I got you. What do you need? You want to play games? You want to play cards? You want me to read you a book? And like, and I get her to laugh, and I'm just like, you're so beautiful. I adore you. You are so beautiful and so loved. I can't even describe how much you're loved. And I get to like do that for her because that's what I feel called to do. And it's super healing.
Yes, and it takes those things that have been internalized and the pain and the fear, and now you get to bring healing to that part of
Yeah.
yourself.
And it's like you're gonna grow. You're gonna grow, you're gonna expand, but not about in success or money. And maybe those things will come, but like the influence and impact and just with a pure heart, you're gonna be okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's what I needed. And so I'm like, okay, that's what I needed. I could sit here and talk about how upset I am, or I could like grow in this way and really believe it and believe it for my clients too. And it's like that belief is getting louder and louder and louder and stronger.
And let me ask you with that, with your commitment to, I'm going to grow, I'm going to heal, how has that shown up in your life? What has been the benefit from having that kind of outlook?
The thing that I do not struggle with is gratitude. I wake up with gratitude. I mean, like, gratitude is not a difficult practice. Like, that's been a beautiful blessing from all of this, is just feeling very grateful. I think I'm naturally pretty positive anyway. I've always been pretty, I can take a paradigm shift. And like, you give me, I remember getting rubber bands, a bag of rubber bands for Christmas one year when my stepsister, and they got keyboards and tennis rackets. And I remember I got a bag of rubber bands, and I remember looking at it and saying, I can make a rubber band ball. Pee Wee Herman had a massive tinfoil ball, and he also had like a rubber band ball. And I remember thinking, like, I could do this. And like, I was able, and again, was that protection? I don't know, but I'd like to think like I like that about her. She or me, it's like I can see the beautiful side or the positive side without being too dismissive of the pain. So I wake up, I have a lot of gratitude. The way I parent is absolutely affected by this. The way I show up as a wife, as a military spouse, as a friend, I say the things. if I have like a compliment in my head or like a thought, I don't hold it in, because like, first of all, when we're in the grief world, like we think we're gonna die every day. I don't know if you do this, Sandy, but I'm like, oh, I'll probably die tomorrow, so I need to like say all the things in real time, you know. And I'm not fearful of it. I'm motivated. I'm motivated by it, right? And so I cherish my moments, and I am unapologetic about my rest and my playtime and my vision of nature and beauty and humanity. I'm more confident. Like when I'm insecure, I won't tell you I'm insecure, but I will know I'm insecure because I'm judgmental. Like I'll see a woman with like the Gucci, with, is it Gucci Vuitton? I don't even know brand names. Anyway, so they're wearing brands and they look like they got it all going on. And I used to be like, oh, must be nice. Oh, I'd have this judgment. So now if I'm judgmental, I stop and I'm like, all right, Tara, what are you insecure about? Because a confident, loved person loves others and sees the beauty in them. And so with that practice, I've noticed there's this lack of envy, lack of jealousy, lack of judgment. And a lot of that has been from me giving love, giving, generosity. And so when we give, we get. And so I've been, I work less. I'm in Portugal, the time difference, but financially, we're really doing okay. Like we're really doing well. I am away from friends and family. I'm making friends. They're really good friends, I have beautiful time with my daughter, the way I parent, the way we play, the way I compliment, the way I, challenge her, the way I ask her about her day. It's just absolutely motivated from this type of growth journey that I've been on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of times when people maybe think about this or think about the idea of walking through healing, or maybe they've been on a journey and they feel like, man, this is harder than I thought, or man, I thought I'd be further along, or I didn't realize I had these parts, that need attention, these parts of me that need to be looked at. I think a lot of times it can feel discouraging, but like you, I like to think of it as, this is just part of the way that I live. And I've incorporated it into my life. And therefore, being on that journey and living that way, it's like, it's so true. Life starts to look so much different. It's so worth it. And I find, and I know you probably see this too, a lot of times people find their purpose or understand their purpose better. I know that purpose word gets thrown around a lot,
Yeah,
purpose and destiny and all that, but it's almost like maybe passion is a better word. They also find passion in healing. They find passion in grieving. They find passion when they go into those places. And so it's so worth it. It's so worth it, because I'm imagining you get to live a lot differently than the way that you were raised. You get to have
well,
a really different life.
and when I thought I had to overcome and compensate for
Yeah.
being ugly and stupid and white trash, or like all the names I was given, I was compensating for internalizing that identity. Now, and so I'd compensate by doing good works. I would compensate by trying to make money. I would compensate by working hard. Now I work hard, I help people, I make money. So the outcome is the same, but underneath that motivation, I'm not compensating. I'm doing it because that's who I am.
Yes.
So like I could work hard, I could love hard, I could play hard because that's who I am. But I'm not doing it to compensate for an identity that were lies that I believe. Now it's like I said, I'm unapologetically like this. It's not this masking this like secret. It's like, no, this is actually who I am. Does it make sense? So it's like the behaviors, like I look the same as I did, not look maybe, but like I behave the same outwardly as I did, 10, 15 years ago. I don't think people who've known me casually would be like, whoa, she has been on a growth journey. Like, I don't know if that would be obvious. I don't think that's obvious because like it still looks the same maybe on the outside. I don't
Actually,
know.
that makes so much sense because that is so true. A lot of times when we've got things internalized, lies, unresolved pain, sometimes people go into the lies and behave from them. And sometimes people react to them and push against it, almost like
Mm,
I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to compensate for what feels like a deficit.
yes, yes, yes.
But it's just as tiring either way. Like it's
Yep.
just as tiring. But when you actually, like you said, go inward and you're like, I'm on this journey. And being on this journey doesn't mean, okay, I'm not going to live. I'm just going to go, look inside and do this stuff and then I'll live. It's like, no, you're living while you're on this journey and things just sprout out from it. So being able
Hmm.
to live from like, this is who I am versus trying to compensate is huge. I mean, I can relate to that. I can
Yeah,
definitely
because
relate to that.
it's like when you too, it's like you get to, I don't know, like this deep knowing or like this intuitive decision making. So like I could do things now not to be liked. Like if, the other day these spouses were like, "Oh, we're going to do grape stomping. Like we're going to do grape stomping." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to say no." And I was like, I used to have like FOMO where I'm like, "Oh, but if I don't go, then I won't get invited to other things and I want them to like me." And I really thought about it. I was like, "Yeah, that just doesn't I don't think I'm interested, but thank you so much for the invite." And I thought like, whoa, that's huge for me because it used to be like, well, what else are you doing? You're just sitting like you answer like, well, what else are you doing? You're at home or you're not. You have time. Like you should do this. That's what everyone's doing. Like you'll be in the popular group or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's just like, no, I make decisions on like, well, this, do I want to? Do I want to? Is this enriching? Like, the answer is no. And even with like being the mommy activities, having your kid in all the activities, like we get to make decisions based on like, do we have the capacity for this? Like the time and the
Yeah.
energy? Like we don't have to do. We're not gonna hustle. I'm not. And again, not because I'm rubbing up against the hustle. I'm internalizing like, is this aligned? I know it sounds like so woo woo, but that's like it's just like
It doesn't.
my we do this. Me and my daughter. I'm like, oh, what'd your gut tell you? She's like, like we could pray about it. We could really make an informed internal decision. Not for people or this
Hmm.
what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's living from identity and being able to love yourself and love others in the truest sense, not in
Yep.
the cliche sense. And that life is much more enriching and you get to be and live how you were meant to be. So what I would ask is, for anybody listening who is maybe, I'm sure resonating with a lot of what you're saying and is maybe recognizing, hey, whether it's, wow, I need to look at some losses or I need to look at what are you talking about with identity and belief? And they're maybe thinking about taking a next step. What would you say to that person?
So what's coming up for me is that if someone was questioning that, like their next step,
Hmm.
I think pause. I call it the pause to process. So we pause. And I really feel led to just say the next step would say to ask ourselves honestly, what's my motivation? What am I motivated by? Am I motivated by compensating? Am I motivated by insecurity? Am I motivated by looking good? Am I motivated by success or money? Am I motivated out of fear? Am I motivated out of feeling unworthy, unloved? Like we get to be really honest with that and say, okay, where's that come from? And if it's
Hmm.
hard to identify that, there's tools to in a process where we can really look at the anything that's emotionally charged. I'm telling you, when you have identity stuff, I remember thinking not making the volleyball team in high school was emotionally charged for me. Someone might dismiss that, like, oh, it's volleyball, it's high school, whatever. If I'm being honest, that was emotionally charged for me. My twin sister made the team. I was struggling with wanting to feel included, have a friend group. So that came up for me. But I need to be able to say that in a safe place where the person across from me doesn't go, Tara, it's just volleyball. You made the soccer team. Like You need, so ask what motivates you. We could start looking at what are experience in our lives that kind of shape up that motivation and that belief system, and then work with someone who could like reflect back to you without any of that dismissing, judgmental, platitudinal language.
Oh, I love it. I think that's such a great takeaway is what's motivating you in your life. And when you can identify that, you can identify areas of growth. That's awesome. Oh my gosh,
Thank
this
you.
has been amazing. Yes, thank you for that. And thank you for being here today. Oh my gosh, all the way from Portugal. I've really, really appreciated this, Tara.
Well, we just got rolling. That was I think I talked way too much, but
No, you didn't. You were awesome.
we
Thank you
did
for
a little.
that.